This is PatZi with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And I have a very special guest today, L.A Chandlar, and she is one of my favorite writers. And I remember when I first saw her, and I will tell you about that in a minute. But first, let's have a look at her. She looks so pretty today. Hi, L.A. Chandlar.
Hi,
You're looking good.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
I remember the first time I saw you, you were, oh, you can always tell, I think sometimes a New Yorker, they're like, they stride. They know what they're doing. They're going places. They're not like just moseying along. Now I live in Texas, and you do see people who actually do mosey along. So you see why they, but you're like, woo. And you're coming down the hallway with red shoes, and you are distinctive. And that was at BoucherCon at the Vinoy Hotel. And it was so great to see you there.
Oh, thanks. Oh gosh, that was such a good conference. Yeah, I do tend to walk fast, even if I have high heels on.
Yeah, you had high heels, and you're like, you're heading for something. I don't know if you were doing a panel that day or something, because probably you look like you
run to those.
That's it. And your distinctive red shoes, which, by the way, we have red shoes in the book today, which is the Hindenburg Spy. I think you can't resist those red shoes, huh?
That's right. LANE Shanders is my protagonist, and that's her trademark. She loves her red Mary Janes especially, but she does try to get shoes that she can run in. So
yeah, that helps.
Yes. Imperative.
Because she does do a lot of running, and she gets into a lot of trouble. And she's often escaping from somebody.
So. Yep. It's one of my favorite things to do is get her into a pickle and then try to come up with a creative way to get her out again. So, yeah.
And she gets into a lot of pickles. And you have so much fun doing it, I think. It's just amazing. I just want to show people that this is the fourth LANE book, right?
Yes.
But there were 3 before it. And those are the wonderful, Art Deco period. They're the silver gun, the gold pawn, and the pearl dagger. Beautiful covers. And there, of course, we have the Chrysler building. And then now we are really getting closer to World War II. So a lot more things are going to happen here that will eventually lead us, I think, into World War II. We'll keep going with LANE until she makes it to the Vietnam War. Because this girl is not going to give up. When she's 80, she's still going to be doing something. That's right. So you have to tell everybody about the book. Tell us where you came out with first of all, just LANE is a great character. One of the reasons I love her, of course, is she's a fan of the Detroit Red Wings. And of course, I'm from Detroit. So I love every time she says something about Detroit.
Yep. She hails from Detroit, but she's raised in New York City, and she's actually an aide to one of our most famous mayors, Mayor Fiorello La Guardia. And he was a 3-time mayor. And the reason I wrote the series, the way I got the idea was I think I had learned about the 1930s in a very pigeonholed kind of way. It was just about the Depression. It was more black and white, not as creative. And I really think I had in my head all of the wonderful Art Deco buildings that we love, and the art, the music happened more in the Great Gatsby era, which was more of the 1920s. But lo and behold, it turns out a lot of that happened in the 30s and after the stock market crash. And I really loved the idea of this beauty out of adversity. And I actually was moving to New York City right after 9/11. We were supposed to be flying here that day, and didn't end up happening, but ended up moving just 2 weeks later. And I saw a city that was broken, but there was this camaraderie and this joie de vivre that was happening despite being brokenhearted, and art was taking off. Humor, gosh, all of the comedians were kind of getting us through the time. And I happened to pick up a biography about Fiorello La Guardia, and I noticed a similarity to New York at the time. It was a time of brokenness in the 30s and despair and hardships, but at the same time, it was also just high fashion and art was going up. All of our favorite Art Deco buildings, like the Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, Rockefeller Center, they all went up after the stock market crash. And I loved that. And then when I was reading more about LaGuardia, I also loved his sense of humor is great. It's so funny. And he loved a good publicity stunt. And I also loved the underdog aspect of him. He was 5'2", double minority, half Jewish, half Italian. He fought in World War I as a fighter pilot, and nobody thought that he would make it as the mayor, but he ended up winning. And then he took the city by storm and was a 3-time mayor. And I love that vivacity that he has. And every time I read articles about him, they always are using storm superlatives for him. He came in like a tornado. He came in like a hurricane. It's so funny. And I was like, oh, women were doing great things in the workplace at the time too, way before World War II and the Riveters happened and women came in by storm. But I was like, gosh, I didn't know all this, and I would love to tell that side of the story. And I felt like that was a potent story for any era. And in these last several years, I think it's especially important for all of us to hear that side of the story and to be inspired by it. And so LANE is the aide of Fiorello La Guardia, and I do get her in a lot of scrapes, but it was actually pretty accurate for the time too, in that LaGuardia took down a whole bunch of mob bosses, and all of his people, his Thomas Dewey, the district attorney, and the police chief, they were doing a lot of work. And Prohibition had just ended when he took office, so the gangsters were in massive control over everything, and he was fearless. So a lot of the scrapes that I get LANE into, there was all sorts of stuff like that happening in real life. And the funny thing is, the more outrageous the action is that LaGuardia is involved in, that probably really happened in real life. I always say you have to read my author notes at the end of books to see what was fiction and what did I come up with, because if it involves him, he probably did it.
I love him too. What a wonderful character to come upon, because he is a character, and I could see that swagger. Pilots have that kind of swagger. It's a special, and they focus. When they want something done, they do it. And if they have to do it themselves, they'll do it themselves. And they knock everybody in line. I just love that aspect of him, because my husband was a pilot and he had that sort of same attitude, and also wanting to do right. Really you've captured the mayor, and I think it's so wonderful. And we all wish we had mayors like that today,
No.
because take charge and get things in order. And he and along with the district attorney and the assistant district attorney, a woman, the first Black woman. You have so many wonderful characters in this story.
Thank you. I love bringing in cameos to help us get a better feel for the era, for what was also going on in history at the same time. And I love to bring in people that are either really famous, but then also the ones that are not necessarily as visible in the world right now. And yeah, I'm actually friends with the current prosecutor, and he was reading my books and he was like, you have to bring in Eunice Carter. We have a plaque of her in 100 Center Street. That's where we all serve jury duty and stuff. That's what the courtrooms are. And I was like, tell me about her. And he's like, yeah, she was the first Black woman prosecutor. And it's really her credit that took down one of our biggest mob bosses, Lucky Luciano. She worked with Thomas Dewey, but she was the one that we at the time this is all in real life, had nabbed some mob bosses, but more for tax evasion and whatnot. And she was convinced that we would be able to get Lucky through the prostitution rings. And so Dewey was like, go for it, let's do this. And so she's the one that did all of it and took him down for this prostitution ring, which had a lot more bite to it as far as the criminal sentencing and whatnot. So she was amazing. So yeah, I bring her in, and she actually helps with some of the mystery and whatnot, and gives some insight to LANE and to her other family of sleuths that are all figuring out what's going on. Yeah.
Doing the research for this book has to be so much fun.
Absolutely. And I actually brought you a couple books. This is a great book called Invisible by Stephen Carter. If you are interested in, here, where's a good way to put this? By in Eunice Carter. It's a wonderful book that tells about all of her work and who took down America's most powerful mobster. And gosh, that was exceptional. So that was wonderful to read all this good insight. And then I have another big cameo that is way more famous, but I have another book that I love, Agent Josephine by Damian Lewis. And I feature Josephine in my book, and I love it so much.
Tell us, this book, of course, the title, we're going to find out about the Hindenburg. First of all, is such a gorgeous cover.
Thank you. I love it too. The art is wonderful.
Now for the series, you have they're all matching, and they're really a very talented illustrator. This is superb. And did you model for it? Did you wear that dress and model for it?
I wish. I did have a couple of friends that are like, that should have been one of those that goes into the contract.
Yeah, you should. Each time you need that dress now, so that when you go to cocktail parties, you walk in with that dress. I think that would be really cool. One of the things I just love so much, how you describe the Savoy Ballroom. I've read about it over the years. I've seen photos of some of it, a little bit in movies and stuff, but you really bring it to life. This place was enormous. Chick Webb explained who he was, and it's funny that people don't know about him because he was so important to this ballroom. Explain where it is for people, because it's not there anymore. They knocked it down. But let's talk
it was
about that.
huge. Is in Harlem in Lexington in 140th about, and it was huge and it was great. It was a really wonderful venture. It was one of the first integrated places in the city, and it was this. There's Chick Webb. There's a Jewish manager, a Black businessman. Like they had everybody combined to do this, and it was wonderful work. And they decided they would have this massive ballroom that would hold 4,000 people. There'd be a band at each end, so that when this band had to take a break, this band would take up the music. So the music never stopped. They decided to never serve hard alcohol, so it was just beer and wine and soft drinks. And the most important part was if you could dance. And so there's even a famous comment that I put in my books too, that nobody really cared who was with who, Black, white, uptown, downtown, Catholic, Protestant, just didn't matter. What mattered was, could you dance? And so there's a famous line of the famous actor Clark Gable walks in, and someone's, oh, isn't that Clark Gable? And the other guy's, oh, can he dance? This is more important. People were watching the feet, the footwork, and the fancy moves, and listening to the music, and all the greats were there. So Benny Goodman and Ella Fitzgerald, and just everybody. And it was truly a wonder. I wish I could go back in time. And it's one of my greatest joys, is being able to write about things like that we get to have, even just for a few moments, an eyewitness view of that. I love it.
Oh, and I do love the idea of the dancing. It's such a lost art, really. Young people think they're at dances. They're not at dances. They're standing there and moving. But really, up until really the 50s, the dance, really, it was so beautiful to watch the feet.
Yeah, it's amazing, and such a backdrop of wonderful art. And I love having art at the background of all of my books. And I've got different artists and writers, and jazz is the art form in this book. And so that's even more important, the backdrop of that art. So I even have a big scene on Swing Street in New York City, which at the time was on 52nd Street between 5th and 7th Avenues. And it really got into play during Prohibition. And so a lot of the famous clubs were speakeasies before then. But then in the 30s, they could be out. So I have a great scene at Onyx right on Swing Street that has Billie Holiday singing. And so those, again, that just brings, I think, more of a tapestry of the whole time period, that you get to really walk in those shoes with people. And that's the best thing, I think, about big cities like that. You get to be walking in the footsteps of both the past, the present, and future leaders in arts and politics and teaching and the medical world. And I love that feeling.
I do too. And what I like is at the beginning, I have this little video where I put for pre-sale. I hope people will get the book now, and it's released on December 23rd. So I wanted, the reason I wanted you early is I wanted to do the pre-sale because it is the time to order it now to have it in people's hands for December 23rd. It's a perfect gift for everybody when anyone you know who likes history, likes mystery, likes love and romance, and we've got plenty of that. And it's just such a great gift. Pre order it, and people will have it for December 23rd so that they can have a nice holiday weekend there reading about Lane and about all of her friends, and she does have many and a diverse range of people. I have my morning playlist. I have 10 songs, and one of them is Ella Fitzgerald, and I usually listen to her. I'll Take Manhattan, which shows you my love for New York. And I imagine myself walking down the streets of Manhattan. Now, of course, at the time of your book, she was very young girl just starting in the business. And in that exciting era on 52nd Street and at the Savoy, and I went to look back and to see what hit songs she had during that period. And the one that made her a star really was Tisket a Tasket. And if they're working on all these inventions to get us to Mars, I would like if they would invent something that would take us back for a couple hours to one of these places. Right?
For sure. Yeah, she was just breaking out then. And then I think Lane even notes that Billie Holiday too, and I think that's what's interesting. Even Lane meets up with Churchill, which she also does in the Pearl Dagger, the book 3, and he at the time wasn't the Churchill that we know yet because it hasn't been World War II and all that, and he describes himself as lost in the political wilderness. So it is fun. It's fun to see these big people before they became the icons that they are, and you get to see these glimpses of who they're becoming. And that too, you're right, it's a really interesting thing to be able to see them before the world knows how great they're going to be, and Lane can get a glimpse of that greatness though. Yeah.
And Churchill loved New York, even though he was hit by a car there and nearly died.
Right, that's right. Yeah, in New York's mayor always had ties with LaGuardia, was close with FDR and Eleanor. Eleanor Roosevelt has a lot of cameos in my books here and there. FDR does in this one. And the mayor he had a lot of close ties with that, and he would with the British government as well too, and that comes into play. So a lot of the people I'm bringing in, even though they're wild cameos, they really were in the same circles. And especially Lane has this Aunt Evelyn, who is a very sophisticated woman, but she has friends in all places, high and low, from Eleanor Roosevelt to prostitutes to artists and Diego Rivera to artists that are just scraping it out at the very beginning of their work. And she's friends with all of them. And I love that. I actually based her on another artist that I know in the city. And that is pretty regular for a lot of artists. They've got all these friends in high and low places. And it's such a aggregate, like a connector.
She's like an Auntie Mame.
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
that. Collecting all types of interesting people. Explain a little bit of the backstory of Lane. In a way, it's a sad story, but it is the reason she's involved in solving crimes, and of course, is what she went through as a child.
Right. The first few books are more about developing her own mystery of figuring out. So not only is there mystery happening in the city, but she realized she's in the crosshairs because it involves some of her complicated past. And so had been orphaned at about the age of 10, and her parents had died. She thought it was in an accident. It ends up being that it was much more involved than that. And so in the first book, the Silver Gun, you're figuring all that out. In the second book, The Gold Pawn, she goes back to Detroit, where she was actually born and had her first 10 years. Then it's specifically Rochester, Michigan. So there's a scene in downtown Detroit, and then there's also in this little town called Rochester, Michigan. And she gets to find out more about what her parents were and really involved in. And so in that book, I always say she has to face the ghosts of her past. And so this is where you see that she's not Superwoman. She is a real human and she's got flaws. And so she has to face these things, and then how it has made her make decisions that she's not sure about now. And she has to really evaluate that. And then in the third book, The Pearl Dagger, she has this love interest, Finn Brody. And in The Pearl Dagger, they actually, see, I like to go, so all the mysteries are based in New York. But I say I like to take the crew on little field trips. So the first book is all New York. The second book, again, all based in New York, but the field trips to Detroit and Rochester. The third book, the field trips to England. And so most of the time they're in London, but they even have a little field trip there where they go up to Oxford and they happen to run into Tolkien and in his group called the Inklings at the time with C.S. Lewis, and they even have a little cameo that's involved in some of her past. But in that book, it's the love interest that has to, Finn, he has to face the ghost of his past. And what I really love about these is I wanted her and her love interest to save each other. Nobody is always the hero. And I really wanted, she's not one of these, in fact, she gets really angry if she's one of, thinks that she's like a simpering woman who's just going to faint at the slightest bit of danger. And so she has to be saved sometimes, but she does a lot of saving too. And so that's that. And then this one, the big trip is actually back to Europe again, because she's got to get back on the Hindenburg. And then this whole story is based on the final dance of her and her nemesis, who's been part of her life forever and who has had a hand in the death of her parents. And they've had this big cat and mouse story. And again, it can be read alone, though. You can read only the Hindenburg Spy and totally understand what's going on. But if you really like character development, then the other three books are great to read as well. But that is why she has to go on the Hindenburg. Lane has to be the one to go. And so this one, they go through the Normandy. They're on the USS Normandy, and which stops off in France, and then they take a pit stop to Paris, and that's where she meets Josephine Baker. And that is more of a little nod to Josephine's future work as a spy. And so she is part of the French resistance in World War II. So the writing is on the wall for her already. So I thought she would be a really great person to give Lane inspiration for this big mission that she's going to do. And Lane has never been, she always has this group of chosen family is a big theme in my books. And so the counterparts, it's Evelyn, it's this love interest, it's Fiorello, it's her friends. They all are this chosen family, and they all kind of help in solving these mysteries and threats against the mayor, threats against the city, and they're all very motivated to want to help protect other people. And so she's by herself on the Hindenburg, and so that is a difficulty for her too. Yeah, she learns a lot about herself, and then there's a lot of interest about the Hindenburg. It's such a disaster on epic proportions, but it's such a strange vehicle. Like, we don't really have an airship like that anymore. And so that was fascinating to write about and to talk to people about. There's a lot of people that have had an era in their, like when they were kids, even that they were fascinated with it. And then other people that don't really know what it is. And so it was really fun to write about.
It's fascinating. And really, when you think about it, the Hindenburg, they could come across the Atlantic in 2 days.
Yeah, it was really fast.
Was fast. Of course, sometimes with all the flight delays we have nowadays, the Hindenburg sounds so lovely. And when you think about it, they had this smoking room on the Hindenburg, why people have to smoke. Give it up for 2 days. Just give it up. But explain how big it was.
The closest thing we have it to this day, it's a blimp, right? Like the Goodyear blimp kind of thing. But it was massive. It was this on the same size as the Titanic or bigger. And it was held aloft with hydrogen. Helium would have been better. Helium is not flammable, but it was much more expensive. So they went with hydrogen. And so that is in large part of why this crash was so spectacular and scary in the end. But a lot of people don't realize that it was so massive. It's basically the size of end to end of 3 747s head to tail lined up. And then it's much bigger height and breadth-wise than that too. So it's just massive. And then the inside, it was closer to a modern day cruise ship than anything else. Everybody had their own berths to sleep. And there was a huge, lovely dining room, gourmet food. The smoking room was really the bar. And they had just fantastic cocktail service and music. They even had a grand piano on board. And it was made out of aluminum to solve for some weight issues instead of the usual wood. And they had, a lot of times, it really was only about 48 hours. So a lot of times people wouldn't even sleep because they didn't want to miss out on anything. And that elegance is what I think is surprising to a lot of people. And I wanted to show that too. The berths were great. They looked a lot like a train compartment, double beds. There was a sink in the room. Like I said, gourmet meal service. And even the meals that I mentioned, I got a book. My husband's the best research assistant. And I got a book that even has the meal plans of what they had served. And that was exactly what they were eating on the ship. The ocean liners at the time were built for speed. They're not like our cruise ships today. They were meant like the Titanic and the Normandy and to get across fast. But the fastest was about 4 days. So it usually took about 4 or 5 days to get across. So this 48 hours was really something. And the other thing people are surprised about is that the Hindenburg is not like the Titanic in that it was a one and done thing, that it wasn't the Virgin voyage. It was actually about a year old, and it had made about 63 different passages, and it was going back and forth across the Atlantic from Frankfurt to Lakehurst, New Jersey, and then also from Frankfurt down to Brazil, back and forth. And it had a lot of miles on it. And I also wanted to bring into play, there's this aspect to it that I still think if we could do it in a safer way than with hydrogen, it would be such an amazing way of travel. Lane even alludes to this because Pan Am actually had the ability to take flights across to Europe at the time, but England wouldn't let the United States land yet because they are really trying hard to get their flight service up first. So we didn't have the quicker service yet by literal jetting across the pond. This was a lot like a hot air balloon in that if anybody has ever been on one, they're so gentle when they lift off. And then a lot of people, even if they're afraid of heights, they actually can do a hot air balloon ride because it's so gentle. And that was the thing of beauty is they were going across Europe, especially. A lot of people would remark in a variety of articles that I read on how the height could go up and down at will. So it was anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000-ish feet as they went, but most often around 1,000. But it could go down to like even 600 feet if they wanted to. And so the captains could take you really close to all these amazing sites all the way across Europe. And then they would see the tip of Greenland and then headed over to Newfoundland and then all the way down the North American coast to New Jersey. And so it was a thing of beauty that I think the speed always usurps everything. And I knew, and Lane can even feel it in the book where it'll always win. But that mode of transportation had to be incredible to be able to have that view and even the romance of it, of having those 2 days to enjoy the food, the cocktails, the music, the people. Yeah, I think it would have been a wonderful thing if they could have made it a more safer venture. And honestly, we had much worse disasters, I had found out too, with airships where there was a higher loss of life. In this disaster, only about 36 people died, which it could have been so much more. There were about 100 people on board, 97. One grounds crew was killed in the disaster. However, it was caught on a newsreel. So the entire explosion was massive and horrific, and they were coming in for landing when it happened. And so the whole thing between the first burst and to everything being just obliterated on the ground was under like a minute. It was crazy. But people really did escape, and more people escaped than perished. So that's how I knew I could get my protagonist in or out of there. You'll have to wait and see.
We definitely. The idea of being able to go just above the ocean and see the whales.
Yeah.
They've probably killed them all now. I don't know, but
No, you can
the
still,
idea of
yeah,
it is
yeah,
so nice, isn't it?
absolutely. Yeah.
You weave a lovely story. So explain a little bit about the love interest, and you came out with a doozy.
Thank you. Yeah, I like him a lot. And I really wanted their friendship to be an important part of it. And like I said, saving each other, not just one of them swooping in to save the day. And I really like them. He's a detective. He has his own issues in the first couple books where he's figuring out who he is. He has his own past that he's trying to overcome. And that's the thing I really love good characters. I love it when you have characters that you feel like they're friends and they've stayed with you. And I feel like, to me, that is what makes a book memorable. I can read books that I love a good plot, and that's what keeps me interested, and it's what gets me to turn the page. But I've also read books where the plot is so interesting and I will read it to the end and I'll give it high reviews. But if the characters aren't developed, I just don't care. Like, I don't know, I don't have, I guess, that heart involvement. And it doesn't have to be about romance. It's more about, like I said, those friendships, or are they interesting? And that's what I really wanted for this. And I love these people. In fact, when my first book came out, we have a lot of speakeasies in the city, New York City. And there's this one that used to happen that once a month you had to dress up like the Times to get in. And they would have a live band and everybody was drinking out of like white coffee cups like you did during Prohibition. And oh my gosh, it was like midnight in Paris. It was like going back in time. Like, you walk into the room and there's just fedoras and flapper dresses and suspenders. And I really love my characters. And I swear it was chills just ran up my spine because I kept feeling like one of them was going to walk around the corner. It was such a great moment. And I think that as a writer, if there's writers watching this, like, finding the things that matter to you the most. And actually, it was an interesting writing point for me that I haven't talked about a lot, but I had written a lot of the book already. But as I alluded to earlier in this one, Lane has a great big portion of the book where she's by herself on the Hindenburg, and she doesn't have her normal family of chosen family people that she's bantering with or bouncing ideas off of it. And it was really funny because the plot was going great. And I remember having this conversation with my husband. I'm like, I'm bored though. Why am I bored? And it was because the characters. I was like, it dawned on me, I don't have enough of this going back and forth with these characters. So he and I discussed it and we were like, maybe we could figure out a way that you can get more of them in it. And there were radio transmissions on ship, and I have a few different point of view chapters where you do see her family and back at home. So the love interest, her aunt, some of her good friends, her best friend reporter, Rourke, and they're all discussing this at the same time that she's on the ship, and they're giving each other radio signals to be more in part of it. And I really liked that because it is told from first person's perspective, from Lane's perspective for most of the book. But through the series, I've always had a few point of view chapters where you're in the mind of somebody else, or maybe even a villain. And that's part of the thriller nature of these books. So it's not just figuring out the puzzle of who done it, but sometimes you can see the action of the villains, and the villains and the protagonist are getting closer and closer together. That was it. That was the thing that I figured out, that I was like, this is what I think I personally was missing, was this interaction, this caring between the characters. And I always think that's my favorite advice to give writers, is finding the things that are part of your heart in writing and what makes you love a book. Because when you figure that out, then when it's missing, you can locate that. And I also find humor is really important to me. And I love to make myself laugh, and I love to make myself cry. So when I'm writing these scenes, if they're really good, I still will crack myself up. And that's always fun when my friends hear me laughing and they're like, you made yourself laugh again, didn't you? I'm like, I am totally laughing at my own jokes.
Well, nowadays, of course, people use text in
Yeah.
books to do that connection between people. Of course, in those days, it would be the radio messages that they could send
Yeah.
across to each other. And
Yep.
it works.
Yeah.
It works very nicely. I like that. And speaking of speakeasies, is that a speakeasy behind you? What is it? Is there a
It does
photo,
look
a
like
picture, a
a bank
door? What
vault.
is it?
It's a door. I'm actually in a conference room in an old mill from 1905, and they have all of these original doors, and there's wood beams everywhere, and it's wonderful. But yeah, I thought that too. I thought it looked like a bank vault.
Yeah, I thought, okay, yeah, one of those bank vaults where you go in and you,
Yeah,
if you know the right code, and they let you in. So I thought maybe
exactly.
you were getting
Right.
ready to go in a
Yeah,
speakeasy. And speaking
exactly.
of speakeasy, when you're a writer and you have a bunch of different characters, like you have, and really you have a wonderful team of characters, everybody has like their own drinks. How do you keep track of what each of your characters likes? Now, I know that Lane likes bourbon. I like
Yes.
bourbon. What do you drink?
I too like bourbon. I like old fashions, but I also like martinis like Lane likes. She does not like it as much as FDR likes a lot of vermouth in his, and she's not a fan of that, and neither am I. I think those are my top two, but I like wine and stuff too. And but yeah, I think an old fashioned has lately been my favorite drink, and then dirty martinis.
And of course, and Evelyn also likes bourbon.
Yeah, she's actually fashioned a little bit. I have a lot of Easter eggs in there. If anybody ever reads any of the Amelia Peabody books by Elizabeth Peters, some of the Easter eggs are that Aunt Evelyn is friends with Amelia Peabody. So sometimes you'll see these little Easter eggs of how Evelyn loves to have a council of war. She loves to have a medicinal tot when everybody is needing to have their council of war or is a little jittery or nervous. So yeah, she likes her bourbon.
Yeah, I
With a
noticed
lot of
that. I did notice. I did notice a connection. Now,
yeah. Did you?
let's
Oh,
go back a
good.
little bit because I want to again touch upon, of course, research, but the fun of doing research, and particularly with Josephine, because this is
Mhm.
a lovely section of the book.
Oh, thanks. I love this section too. Meeting Josephine Baker at Chez Josephine in Paris. Oh, so good.
She was an amazing person.
Yeah, yeah. And this is before World War II. So she had just come back in real life from New York. And she was raised in St. Louis, and she's an African American woman, entertainer. And she was really disheartened with the racism in the United States. And she went to Paris, and she loves the United States, but Paris became her home, and they welcomed her. And she had just come back from, I think in 1930, this whole book takes place in the spring of 1937. And in 1936, Josephine Baker had gone to part of the Ziegfeld Follies in New York. But man, she was treated bad through the racist nature of the country at the time. And so it was a bad time for her. And so she went to Paris when they loved her. And then she opened up this club. And then I took a lot of the notes from that book I showed earlier, Agent Josephine. There's a couple other books I found too, but that had this exact description of her club, and I tried to make that come alive of what it looked like. She's super funny, and she's definitely got a good sense of humor, and her club is a riot. And even her dress that she had on, I described one of her favorite dresses that she likes to wear. And then in the future, she does become a spy in World War II, and a very formidable one. In fact, she even carried a cross that looked like a necklace like this, but she carried poison inside in case of capture. And so she was really formidable with the French resistance. And then anti-racism was a big part of her power and how she could try to affect change across the world. And so she even spoke at the March on Washington in 63.
I have a feeling we're going to see more of her.
Would love to happen.
And in a way, when you do this much research on a character, they become part of your life.
It's true. It's totally true. And it really makes you understand their humanity better too. Really You can get all these iconic moments that you hear about, but when you start really writing a scene, researching a scene, and reading the scene, I think you understand that humanity better. Yeah.
And
A lot of times the historic series, they're like a year at a time. These are a season at a time. So mine first takes place like the summer of 36 is the Silver Gun. Then it's like the fall into Christmas is the Gold Pawn. And then the Pearl Dagger is like January, February, March in 37. And then this is spring of 37. So it would be the summer of 1937 would be the next one. So I have an idea of where I would like to take that, but we'll have to see.
lots of exciting history to draw upon. That's for sure.
Yes.
You discover so many things that you hadn't thought that you would ever know about.
Yeah, a lot of the crimes that I have in my books, like this one opens with there's a murder that happens in the city, and that I usually have some kind of real crime actually happen in my books that I work with. And I love doing that because I find such inspiration out of it. But in real life, that opening scene really did happen. So Fiorello discovers he's going about his regular day, and then he hears about two children being kept at the adult prison that we had up in Harlem at the time, Harlem Prison. And children were not supposed to be there. And not only were they not there, they were witnesses to a crime. And at the time, it was pretty typical to just keep the witnesses, and they'd even put a bail on these two kids, and it was like $35,000 at the time. It would have been like $1 million today. So he hears about it, has a fit, and runs up to the prison and ransacks the place like he loves to do. He just shakes it down, and he finds the kids and in real life. And then he takes them to Children's Society and takes care of them himself by doing that. But what the history books don't tell you is, what did they witness? And so I took that part and I was like, let's give them something interesting to witness. And then I put the kids, actually, some minor characters in the books too, because I think they're great. I really enjoyed writing them too.
Now, did he really speak so many languages?
Yeah, he spoke like 7 languages. And that was what was interesting too. People loved him. There's another scene in, I think it's the 3rd book, but it really did happen too, where he goes down to one of the relief stations. It was one of the very first precursors to any kind of welfare program. And so he heard that the citizens were not being taken care of very well by the people who are running this station, this office. So he goes down himself. And again, this is the outrageous stuff that you think that I wrote, but he really did it. He just decided to just wait in line with everybody else. He didn't make a scene, and he just waited and waited. And there's this huge line of people. The workers were not watching him. There's even a policeman who's asleep in a chair that's got the feet off the ground. And then he finally can't handle it because they're not getting through the line. And so he, of course, blows up, and everyone then starts to realize, because he really yelled a lot, he was always bellowing around at everybody, and he had a kind of high-pitched screechy voice. So everyone's, oh my gosh, it's the mayor. So he gets to the front, and he goes, and he fired somebody on the spot, and he yelled to get his commissioner there, who was in charge of that, like right now. And then he gets his watch out. He goes, all right, let's see how fast we can get this line of people done. And he hits his watch. Let's go. And then everybody flew into action. They got through the line in quick order, and he goes to leave. And in real life, nobody had left. They all waited for him outside of the building so that they could talk with him and meet with him. And Lane's watching all of this in the book, and she watches him speak like almost everybody's own language, or at least one that there's close enough. And yeah, really something to see. And he had his own faults too. I'm sure my view is a little bit more of a romantic view of him, but those aspects of him were absolutely true. And the funny part is he vaulted when he loses his mind and he goes to go take care of business with the leaders. There's a low wall, and he vaulted over it to get back to them. But that's the kind of thing, he really did do all that. So it sounds like a sensationalist take on it in my book of fiction, but that actually happened.
That's why the book is so much fun to read. There's so much to discover. And I love the idea of you doing research. Did you have to go to the Blue Room at the Algonquin to check
I
if the cocktails were any good? This is
I did.
research and this is tax
I
deductible.
yes, and it's suffering for the
I know.
cause, but yes.
Yes,
I
we suffer for our art, right?
Yes, absolutely. I have another one to place too that's great. When you come up, we'll have to go sometime, but it's at the top of the Beekman, not the Beekman Hotel downtown, but the Beekman on 49th Street on the east side. And there's a wonderful place at the very top of that one, Ophelia Lounge. And I have a scene there in, I think it's the Gold Pond. And it used to be one of the only women only clubs in Lane's day, and they refurbished it relatively recently, and oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. There's all these velvet settees everywhere. It's like a 360 tower at the top, and then they have all these black and white parquet floors, and oh, good heavens, that too is just a place to hang out, but it really feels like you're walking back in time because Lane could have and would have gone there. So yeah.
Wow. I'm going to have to come because when I come to New York, I'm at the Algonquin. That's where I stay.
Okay, got you.
Okay.
Got you. I
So
love the Algonquin. Have
I
you been
love
there
it.
recently?
I just love to sit there in the lobby and of course a little trip once in a while towards
Nice.
5 o'clock over to the Blue Room. So,
Yep.
but we suffer for our art when we have to do this kind of research and the IRS has to accept the bill.
Yes. It's a hardship.
I know. You've already mentioned that you've got an idea for the next book, but I
Yes,
have
this
an
one.
upcoming book that you're working on. So tell us about this
Yep.
one.
Yep. It's out. It's out of my hands. There's just editing processes and whatnot. But yeah, it comes out November, the Thanksgiving week of 2026. And this is a standalone book. It's not part of the series. It's a modern day journalist is given the task to come to New York to find what she considers a really fluff assignment at first, and to find these hidden stories about the different holidays that are in December, specifically that have happened in and around New York City. And she thinks it's fluffy. She's an investigative reporter. She's done a lot of heavy duty work in her life, and she doesn't really understand this fluffy nature of the holidays, like, and how you celebrate when life is really hard, and she's seen some really hard things. So she digs up all these stories. She talks to ancestors and historians and finds all these kind of forgotten stories that are actually really true. Everything is based on true stories, and the subtitle is based on true historical events that changed the course of history. And it's lovely. I got the idea for a book. I was speaking with a group that works with the United Nations, and they had asked me to come in and do a talk for they were having a tea for a bunch of the different women at the United Nations, and it was always in December, and this is years ago, and they had said, they knew I did a lot of historical work. They said, could you do a little talk about just some of the holiday traditions, like the icons that you see around the city, wreaths, the Rockefeller Christmas tree, the menorahs, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, just like any good author does, I said, yes, I could totally do that. No problem. So we got this talk together and had so much fun, even finding things like the first Rockefeller Christmas tree was put up in the early 1930s by the construction workers. It wasn't the Rockefellers who came up with the idea. It was during the Depression. Rockefeller lost over half his fortune in the crash. They were going to build this Rockefeller Center, and his major partner, the opera, pulled out of it. And he knew that the building of the city was going to be what's going to save the city. So he personally put the loan out for continuing to build Rockefeller Center. And that project alone created 75,000 jobs. And the construction workers ended up, the first Christmas Eve, I think it was 1931, decided to put the tree up, and they decorated it with construction worker stuff like blasting caps and construction paper around it. And you can even Google it. If you Google the first Rockefeller Christmas tree, you can see it. And Rockefeller saw it in real life, and he decided that would be a wonderful tradition. So again, it's a really interesting book because this modern day journalist is collecting these stories. And I actually did go interview the Rockefeller historian. And so she gets the nitty gritty about just those logistics. But then the historian or an ancestor decides, would you like to hear another story about it? And she's, of course. And then you turn the page and it's the next chapter. And it's December 23rd, 1931, New York City. And you go get to read this eyewitness account. And this is the fictional part. I take a character who's an eyewitness to one of these events and lets us get to sit in the pocket of that and enjoy perhaps what could have happened to come up with an idea such as that. And so we hear about all sorts of things from 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, the inception of that happened in Chelsea, New York, to the first radio transmission in 1906. We hear there's a story about the Civil War and how the end of the Civil War, when at Appomattox Courthouse happened, and then the 5 days later when Lincoln was assassinated actually happened over Passover. And I found a Jewish magazine that gave you an eyewitness view of what happened when people were on their way to services for Passover, when they got word of mouth about the Lincoln assassination. And through all of that, and another part of it ends up a beloved Christmas carol is written during that, like out of all of that during the Civil War. And so there's all these stories that I'm like, I've never heard of these. And I would love, again, to be able to bring to life some of these lost stories. So it has a touch of the history, but it really is a modern day journalist is through it all learning herself. And she has life lessons that she discovers along the way. So it was a really yummy book to write. I love it. And I love my main character in that one and the lessons she learns. And I really love being able to touch on these kind of stories that maybe a lot of us haven't heard, or maybe heard a little bit about, but we didn't get to really sit in that pocket and feel that history.
Wow, this is fantastic. It's a fantastic idea, and I'm looking forward to it. So I will, of course, have you on. We'll be talking about that again. But that's wonderful. But meanwhile, I want people to get the Hindenburg Spy. It's by L.A. Chandlar. And you can go to her website. She has more information there. What else do you have on your website that people might find?
You can sign up for my newsletter. I actually have everybody who signs up to be part of the newsletter. I will send you a free gift at the end of December, which actually is an excerpt of that book that's not even out yet, from The Lost Stories, as my gift to you. I have a lot on there. I have different articles that I've written, where to find me. I'm on Instagram most often with different stories and pictures and things that I'm doing around the city, but also Facebook too.
I think all of your stories are wonderful. This book is lots of fun, a great read. And as I said, it's a wonderful gift book. You can give it as a gift to anybody because it has something for everybody in this book. And they will love it, and just pre-order it now, and they'll have it on December 23rd. Okay?
That's right. Thanks,
okay.
PatZi.
Thank you again for joining me. It's always a joy to talk to you and to see you. And I always, whenever I see red shoes, I think of you. I used to think of Dorothy until I met you, and now I think of you. There's so many things in the book that I just love, and reminded me of things that I love about New York. So if you love New York City, this is also just a book that you'll want to read because there's so much history in it. So again, thank you. L.A. Chandlar, you are terrific.
Aw, thank you so much. This has been a total joy.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Bye.
Help us help authors. A message from Joy on Paper Live's host, PatZi. Just click that button.
Thanks.